Hello Year 5 and welcome to your reading lesson for today. So before we move on with our new skills today, we're going to do some warm-up activities. So let's have a look at our retrieval questions. So number 1, what is the difference between a fact and an opinion? And another number 1, which should be number 2, where might you find a balustrade? So I want you to pause the video, see if you can answer those two questions. Okay, so the difference between a fact and opinion. So we know a fact is based on concrete evidence, okay? Whereas an opinion is more a thought or a feeling that someone has. So my example yesterday was I said I was a very good runner. And Keaton turned around to me and said, well, yes, miss, you're absolutely right. That is very much an opinion because I think I'm faster than you. So Keaton quite rightly put me in my place. So that very much was an opinion. So that's a thought or a feeling that someone might have. Now, where might you find a balustrade? Now, this came up in one of our chapters we looked at the other day. So these are the little rungs, okay, the little pipes or columns that go between certain things like the side of your staircase, so your banister. You might find them along a bridge, like on a motorway. Sometimes you see the lines. You might even find it on a balcony. If you go to any Roman baths or any old buildings, you might have the columns on the balconies made of stone. That is a balustrade, okay? So well done if you got those two correct. So today's objective is to interpret information through retrieval. Now, we do retrieval every day because in order to answer a lot of our questions, we have to retrieve the information from somewhere, or at least retrieve some clues. So by the end of the lesson, you need to be able to identify new vocabulary in the correct context. I'm going to show you some vocabulary for today. You need to then understand what it means to retrieve information because this is something we do all the time. We actually need to know what it means to retrieve. We're then going to identify keywords in the questions, which is something you should be doing in every single lesson anyway, including maths lessons and geography lessons, any lessons with questions. And then you're going to have a go at answering multiple answer style questions, okay? So let's have a look at our vocabulary for today. So on page 35, it says rummaging around in the matchboxes. Okay, so we're going to look at the word rummaging. Now this is a verb, but in this text, it's what we call a present participle. So although it's something that they've started, it's something they're still doing. So you could say they rummaged, which would be past tense, but if they're rummaging, although they've started it, it's still going. So it's a present participle. So it's got 3 syllables, rummaging. Okay, rummaging, it's 3 syllables. Now we define this when someone is searching for something in a very untidy or disorganized fashion. So if you imagine, certainly when I was a teenager, my room wasn't the tidiest, room in the house. And I might be looking for something. I might just rummage through everything, which might just open all my drawers and start throwing everything out of my drawers because I'm rummaging, I'm looking for something, but I'm not doing it in a very tidy fashion or a very organised fashion. Some of you do that when you go through your trays. When I say, right, get your green pens out. I don't know where my green pen is. And you go rummaging through your trays, which means you tip everything out of your tray all over the floor to find the smallest of things. You know who you are. Yazan. So, let's put it into a sentence so that you understand a little bit more. So Granny Sophie rummaged through her pockets in search for her glasses. So that might suggest that she's got other things in her pockets. Now we know what grannies have in their pockets. They always have some form of a tissue. They might have a sweet. My grandma used to always have one of those Werther toffee originals in her pockets. So she had to go through a rummage to have a nosy through her pockets and empty that to find her glasses. Now I love some of these synonyms. So although these are synonyms, obviously, we're looking at the word rummaging. These synonyms are really, really good. So you might want to forage for something. You might want to search for something. If you delve into something, that's almost like diving really deep into something to try and find what you're really looking for. Or to scour. Now, sometimes we might say that we scour the text as well. So that's almost having a look, but it's a good deep look. So obviously, when you're rummaging, you're getting really deep into what you're looking for. Now, our antonyms, being the opposite, would be to arrange something. Obviously, arrange it neatly, like Miss Humphrey's desk. It's very neatly arranged. To organise something or to systematise something. So that's where you do something in steps. So you do it following a routine or a system. So rummaging is one of the words we're going to look at today. Our next word we're going to look at, which is on page 37, is said Gilbert portentously. Very fancy word. So looking at the word portentously, and this is an adverb, okay? So this is how we would describe the verb that someone's doing. So usually the way someone's behaved or the way they've said something. So it's 4 syllables, portentously, portentously. Now, this is quite a hard word to grasp for definition, but it's when someone tries to sound very important, but they try too hard. It's almost a little bit sometimes when they're quite smug or over the top about something. So it's doing something in a way that's trying too hard to sound like you're important. For example, this gentleman up here, he's probably said or done something, but he's stood with such poise and such pose. He clearly thinks he's above everybody else. So he's trying to make himself more important than really he probably is. So let's put this in a sentence. So I'm far better than you at sport by miles, he replied portentously. Sounds very similar to what Keaton said to me yesterday about him being better at me at sport. Interesting. So let's include some of our synonyms, okay? So you could be quite pompous, quite proud, or very overconfident. I wouldn't say Keaton was overconfident because really he is faster than me. I'll let him off with that one. So those are some of our synonyms that we could use. So it's all about being very important, but almost over the top. Now, the opposite of that is to be the opposite of proud and to be the opposite of in someone's face or to think you're more important than you are. So you could be unimportant. You might even be insignificant. But equally, you can be someone that keeps things to themselves. You know when it's important to make your worth known to somebody. So you should be quite humble. And that's quite a nice thing to tell someone. That's someone who just gets along with things and doesn't expect any airs or graces to go with it or thank yous. So those are our 2 vocabulary words we're going to look at. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a read of our next 3 pages. Now, if you'd like to pause the video and read it yourself, by all means. If not, carry on playing to listen to my beautiful voice read you the story. So, by the time you reach this spot, you ought to have most of the journey behind you. But the region beyond... Gilbert sighed and shook his head. Zilch. Zero. Naught. Nothing. Total radio silence. Even a tourist party of Buddhist temple mice I met down by the harbour last year couldn't tell me anything useful about it. And I'm afraid that's exactly where the place you're looking for lies, if it really exists. So this is leading on from the bit that we read yesterday where they've gone to ask Gilbert for help to try and find the rim of heaven. And I'm afraid that's exactly where the place you're looking for lies, if it really exists. I'm planning to ask a relation of mine to survey the area sometime soon, but until then, he said, shrugging his shoulders regretfully, until then you'll just have to ask your way, if you get that far. I've no idea who or what lives around there, but I'll bet, he said, stroking his white whiskers, I'll bet there are rats. We rats go everywhere. That's a great comfort, I'm sure, muttered Sorrel, looking gloomily at the globe. Looks like there's a long-haul flight ahead of us. Oh, it's even further to New Zealand, said Gilbert, swinging paw over paw back along the cord to the desk. But I'll admit it is a long way, even for a dragon. Long and dangerous. May I ask what put the idea of such a journey into your minds? I know from Rosa that you dragons have quite a comfortable life up there in the north. Sorrel looked at Ben and cast the rat a warning glance. Oh, I see. Gilbert Greytoe raised his paws. You'd rather not say in front of this human? Of course. We rats have had some bad experiences with humans too. Gilbert winked at Ben, who was standing, feeling embarrassed and not sure where to look. Nothing against you personally, understand? Greytail went back to his computer and began typing again. Right, here goes. Destination, Himalayas. Travel party, 1 dragon, 1 brownie. Travel options. Calculate the safest route. Danger spots. Places to avoid at all costs. Best travelling time. Enter. The rat stepped back, looking pleased with himself. The computer hummed like a captive bumblebee. The screen flickered and went black. Oh no! Gilbert Greytail jumped on the keyboard, hammering at it frantically, but the screen did not respond. Ben and Sorrel exchanged anxious glances. Gilbert leapt up and slammed the lid of the laptop down over the keyboard. Like I told you, he said crossly, nothing but trouble. Just because a little salt water got into it, I mean, do you stop working if you happen to drink a sip of salt water? Furiously, he jumped off the desk to the chair that sheltered his little study, slid down one of the chair legs and began rummaging around in the Matchbox index files. Ben and Sorrel lay down on the floor and watched. You mean you can't help us after all? Asked Sorrel. Yes, I can. Greytail was fishing tiny fingernail-sized cards out of the files and flinging them down on the desk. If that stupid thing won't work, I'll just have to do it the old-fashioned way. Can one of you great big giants open the 3rd drawer down in the chest of drawers there? Ben nodded. When he opened the drawer, a large quantity of maps fell out. Maps large and small, maps old and new. It took Gilbert Greytail some time to find the one he was after. It looked odd, quite different from the maps Ben knew. More like a small book folded up over and over again, with narrow white ribbons dangling from the pages. A map, said Sorrel, disappointed, when Gilbert proudly spread this oddity out in front of them. You mean all you have for us is a map? Well, what did you expect? Looking offended, the rat put his paws on his hips. Sorrel didn't know what to say. Tight-lipped, she stared down at the map. Look at it, will you? Gilbert passed his paw lovingly over the seas and mountains. This map's got half the world on it, and very few blank spots, only those places I couldn't discover anything about. But unfortunately, as I was saying, most of those do happen to be where you're going. See these ribbons? He beckoned the two of them over and pulled one of the ribbons. Part of the map immediately unfolded, and another map came into view. Cool, exclaimed Ben. But Sorrel just made a face. What's that in aid of? This method, said Gilbert proudly, twirling his whiskers, is my own invention. By pulling the ribbons, you can see each part of the map again on a larger scale. Useful, don't you think? Looking pleased with himself, he closed the map again and tugged at his ear. Now, what else? Oh, yes, just a moment. Gilbert took a little tray from his desk. On it stood 6 thimbles full of inks, each one a different colour. A bird's feather with its quills sharpened lay beside them. I'll write down the meaning of the different colours for you, said Gilbert portentously. I expect you know the usual. Green for lowland country, brown for mountains, blue for water, and so on and so forth. Everyone knows that, but my maps tell you rather more. For instance, I'll use gold, he said, dipping the pen into a thimble of bright gold paint, for my recommended flight path. And red, he added, carefully wiping the pen on the leg of the chair and dipping it into the red ink, to shade in places you ought to avoid because the humans there are fighting each other. Right, we'll pick those last few sentences up for our next lesson.